What's up, scholars? Welcome back to another video. As you can tell from the title, we are going to be doing a review of the Acotar series today, A Court of Thorns and Roses. All five of these books. I have been wanting to do a book review on this channel for a long time, and I figured covering this behemoth of a series would be a good place to start. I know all of my things don't match. They're all different. It's fine. I'm fine. It is what it is. I got them to read them. It's fine. It's fine. So first things first, I just want to say major props to Sarah J. Maas for writing this series to begin with. It is not easy to write a book, let alone a series as long as this one. So props to her for doing this, because that is a lot of work, a lot of effort. Now, this is going to be my personal opinion for this review, so there's going to be kind of some mixed feelings in here of things I liked, things I didn't like. But honestly, I still have a great amount of respect for the author and this series, regardless of what I like or didn't like. I see a lot of reviews for this series where people either absolutely love it or they absolutely hate it, or something like that. But I'm just gonna be honest here. There are things I loved about this series, there are things I didn't like about this series, but it's still a good series overall, so it's gonna be fun. So pretty much for the format of this video, we're gonna go each book at a time, so obviously starting with A Court of Thorns and Roses, and I'm gonna give kind of my review for the book in a very short synopsis type of way. And whenever there are spoilers, I will put a timestamp, so you know if you haven't read the book, you'll know where to skip to get to the next book, so you can avoid those spoilers. But after I talk about all of the books, I'm going to rank the books of what was my favorite one to my least favorite, and then I'm going to mention my top 3 favorite characters. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So let's get into it, starting with A Court of Thorns and Roses. So A Court of Thorns and Roses as a book was a pretty good first book in a series. And the plot of this one is a little convoluted because you can tell it is the start to a series. You could tell there's so much setup in this book that it leads into the rest of this. I'm going to throw this. But there's a lot of setup in this book that leads to the rest of the series, and there's a lot of build-up. There's a lot happening in this book. But for the overall plot, I really enjoyed the kind of slow burn romance. I know what y'all are gonna say. Just wait till book 2. Okay, I got it. But for book 1's credit, I do like the slow burn romance that they had in there. I liked the retelling of Beauty and the Beast that she did with this book, and how she kind of made it into something new with the whole plot of how Feyre goes over the wall and into, or what's it called, Prythian? Yeah, into Prythian with all of the Fae. And the build up to the curse that happens in this book is pretty well done. So for the main characters of this book that I'm going to be talking about, there's Feyre, obviously, Tamlin, go Tamlin, Nesta, Elaine, Lucian, Feyre's father, Rhys, and Amarantha. Now if I say Rhys's name, instead of saying Rhysand, if I say Rysand, I'm sorry. The pronunciation still kind of trips me up a little bit, I'm not even gonna lie. But those are the main cast of characters that we get in this book. And I will say, for such a large cast, the characterization of each of these different characters was pretty well done. You got a good feel for who most of these characters are. Now, of course, in the rest of the series, these characters are further explored, and you kind of see them really come into themselves the more you spend time with them. And that's especially in Feyre's case, because I will be honest, I wasn't the biggest fan of Feyre in this first book. There were a lot of things that I was really frustrated with her about, and things that I didn't quite understand about her character. But as we go further into this series, I see her character explored more, and I grew to really like her character. So these little tidbits that we see of her character, who she's fighting with, who she wants to be versus who she really is. It's a pretty interesting dynamic, and I like that part of it, and there's a big conflict within her character just from the get-go. So I do enjoy that. Tamlin as a character in this book was one that I really enjoyed. I really liked Tamlin's character in this. I'm not going to get into too heavy detail for those who haven't read this book, but he was a good male lead in the first book and really pretty much opened Feyre's eyes to a lot of the possibilities in Prythian and being Fae, and kind of introduces her into their world. And the way he does that through some pretty interesting rituals and traditions. It's a little strange, and I wasn't the biggest fan of some of them, but you know, which is very ironic, but he gives Feyre this sense of freedom and kind of being herself in this first book a little bit, and lets her kind of experience life that she thought she would never have, and experiences something, this joy that she hasn't had in so long. I really did enjoy that about his character in this book particularly. So going on to Lucien, I really liked his character. He felt like more than a side character. He honestly felt like he could have been competing against Tamlin as the romance for this book, but he wasn't. I don't even think he was interested in Feyre that way, but that's fine. But yeah, Tamlin was more than a side character. He was someone who was by Feyre's side, even though he didn't particularly like her or had her favor at first. He was always kind of there testing her, and even in his own weird way would protect her and try to keep her from doing stupid stuff, which she did anyways. That's besides the point. And he also encouraged her at some point to do the stupid stuff. So I mean, they had a really interesting relationship, a really interesting friendship. And towards the end of this book, I'm not going to say quite yet because we're not to the spoiler section, I like how he helps Feyre in this book. And that leads us to the next characters. I'm going to kind of lump them into one category since they don't have that much time in the book in this first one. Nesta, Elaine, and Feyre's father. If he had a name, I'm so sorry, I completely forgot it. Yikes. But their life was awful. Feyre's family, they did not have a good life. You can say what you will about her sisters. It wasn't a good situation all around. None of the sisters really got along with each other. Even Elaine and Nesta had their moments. But Nesta and Elaine are these kind of very dependent and very proud characters in their own way. Elaine is a proud character in a different way than Nesta is a proud character, and that's very apparent even in this first book, and it gets more apparent down the line in the series. And I like how these characters are super distinguishable from the get-go. I really enjoyed that part of it because you can tell exactly what their personalities are. And the same with Feyre's father. He was not my favorite character. His character kind of confused me a little bit, honestly, because of just the way he interacted with his daughters and the way he treated people and the way he was so obsessed with like wealth and things like that. But Feyre's father, as a figurehead in their family, kind of made Feyre step up to take on the role that he failed at doing. Despite him, if he wanted to do that or anything, he didn't, and he couldn't, so she had to. So that dynamic leaves a huge impact on Feyre, and it's a huge part of her struggles in this first book specifically. Those three characters kind of affect Feyre in a similar way of she's constantly going back to them, constantly thinking of them and thinking of what they're doing and what they're thinking. That whole dynamic, and it really has a long-lasting effect on even her personality for the time being. The other character we're going to talk about is a fan favorite. It's Rhys. Now, I'll be perfectly honest, I did not like him in this book. Not even momentarily in this book did I like him. And there's a reason, and I'm not going to talk about it yet. But he is a very interesting character, despite me not liking him. He's a very interesting character, and he has a very twisted way of trying to help Feyre out in this book, and we don't really get a lot of Rhys in this book. It's kind of more of like the tip of the iceberg of his character and who he truly is, and there's a lot of mystery shrouding this character that you know you're gonna see more of later on in the series. And the last one is Amarantha. Amarantha is the villain of this story, of this book, and for the villain, I think she should have had more impact than what she did. And not... I'm trying to figure out a way to say this without giving any spoilers. She wasn't as intimidating as I originally thought she was going to be, I will say that. So now we are going to get into the spoilers of this book. So if you don't want those spoilers, there's the timestamp down below. You can skip and it'll start at A Court of Mist and Fury. So for the spoilers of A Court of Thorn and Roses, oh boy, this wasn't my favorite book in this series. It took me a little bit to get through it because I was getting so frustrated with Feyre, the way she was trying to constantly like trick the Fae and try to outsmart them or hurt them and things like that. I don't know why that bugged me so much, but that irritated me so much about her character in this book. I think the curse could have been played out to be much more significant, and I know the effects of the curse is what really has a play in this story and in this series, is like the effect of 50 years under the mountain and things like that kind of thing. But I think it should have been done a little bit different. This is just my personal opinion. It could have been done a little bit differently to really show the true impact and like the true power Amarantha had over them. Because when we finally get to Amarantha under the mountain, and we've heard all these stories about her and how powerful she is and how she has a hold on everybody, she doesn't seem all that powerful and she doesn't seem all that threatening. It really seems that if they really wanted to, the Fae could have just ganged up on her and killed her and the curse would have been broken. Because they still had some of their powers left. They weren't just completely helpless. So they could have still fought back. Because, I mean, you could kill her and the curse would be lifted. Am I right in thinking that? If I misunderstood that part, let me know. But for the curse itself, the whole true love thing, like, of course it's typical since it's a Beauty and the Beast retelling. But I was really hoping it'd be like a little bit different or have like a big twist at the end so it's not like, not what you're expecting. And I was really conflicted on Amarantha's character. She I will be honest, she let me down as a villain because she wasn't that smart and she wasn't as cunning as she thought she was. Because honestly, she should have just killed Feyre whenever she showed up. And it would have solved all her problems. It made no sense for her to try to bargain with Feyre, to do the trials, the tasks, any of that. What I do appreciate under the mountain was the fights were pretty good. I finally realized what they were saying with her facing off with the worm. It's not, you know, the Alaskan bull worm from SpongeBob. It's like a wingless dragon. So that kind of affected the way I read that scene. But I did appreciate that even under the mountain, Lucien, even though he was being held captive by Amarantha, he was doing everything he could to help Feyre out. And I think for what Feyre experiences in the next book with her trauma, what she went through under the mountain should have been expanded more and not just at the very tail end of the book, so that we would have understood more of it later on. Speaking of under the mountain, Rhys, I don't care. I'm sorry guys, I don't care what you say. There is no excuse in the world that is good enough for what he did to Feyre in this book. I know how it is in the next few books, and I get it, but I don't. What he did to her under the mountain is unexcusable, in my opinion. And I think that is something I will never forgive him for personally. But that's just me. But what I do like about this first book is that it does play into the series as a whole. There's a lot of good foreshadowing. There's a lot of good development in here that you know is going to be talked about and further explored further later on in the series. And I do like that. It's a good starter book. I may have my gripes with how certain things go, but all in all, this was a really good starter book for a series, and I did like it. A Court of Mist and Fury, the second installment in this 5-book series so far. I think she's working on another book. I don't know. So the second book in this story, this plot is a lot different than the first book. It throws you in a completely separate direction from what the first book was going in. We explore a lot of Feyre's character in this book. There's a lot of her trauma. There's even more romance in here. We're truly introduced to the whole mate thing. And we get introduced to our next big villain, the King of Hybern. And there's also a lot of duality discussed in this book, and a lot of facades that people put up versus who they are perceived to be versus who they really are. And that goes on a lot in this book. It's one of the heaviest things, is this duality between people and like personality and what people think they are. And it was leaps and bounds from where the first book was. And I could really tell that her prose was getting stronger through this second book, and it was getting better. The dialogue was more crisp, and the conversations between characters was better. And I really enjoyed this one so much more. I read this so fast. This was really good. And the plot follows through Feyre's perspective, and there's a lot more conflict in the first one, but a lot of this book is very character driven. The plot is almost secondary to the character development in this book, and there's a lot of books like that, and I actually quite enjoy that because you can really get to know these characters that you're spending all of this time with, and this book does that really well. You really get into the mind of Feyre specifically in this book, and you also get into the mind of some of the other characters, the new ones that come in and some of the ones that are reestablished from the first book. I like that a lot. And there's a lot more world building. We're really introduced to like the scope of Prythian with all the different courts and the different leaders, the lords and ladies of the different lords of the courts. And I really found that interesting. There's a bit of politics that go on in this book, but it's not like heavy enough that you're kind of like turned away from it. So I do enjoy that part. And of course, just like in the first book, there's a lot of foreshadowing in this book that gets played out in the rest of the series, and it builds on the foreshadowing from the previous book, so it did really well with that. So now let's talk about the characters in this book. You have all the characters from before, plus we are introduced to a whole slew of new characters, but the main ones I'm going to be kind of like mentioning or talking about is Cassian, Azriel, Amren, Mor. Yeah, those are the four new. Those are the only new ones, and then you still have Feyre, Rhys, Tamlin, Lucien, Nesta, Lane. All of them. My favorite ship begins to spring in this book, and it is not the ship y'all are thinking of. I can almost guarantee that. But I love these new characters. So these characters are part of the inner circle for the Night Court. That's not really a spoiler, that's just a fact. Part of Feyre's journey is healing through what she went through in the first book and all the trials she underwent, and there's a lot of trauma that she has to sort through, and being around this new group of characters and being around Rhys really helps her kind of realize a lot of things, and she starts becoming her own person, not someone that she was expected to be, not somebody that she wanted to be perceived as, but who she really is as a person. And it's not who she tried to act as in the first book. There's more characterization on Rhys, and I will say I enjoyed his character a lot more in this book. while I know he's supposed to be a morally gray character, part of that duality that's one of the biggest themes of this book is explored with his character in particular, which makes me think a little bit differently, but I'm gonna save that for the spoiler section. Rhys, his character is more developed, and they kind of dive into the explanation of what his role was in the first book and what his role is now and what he's really trying to do, his real goals, his real plans and aspirations, and why Feyre is so crucial to all of it. It's really hard to talk about this book without spoiling everything, honestly. I didn't think I'd have this hard of a time. But I will say, Cassian and Azriel, fantastic. They're some of my favorite characters. I love the dynamic that they bring to this book. It brings some levity, it brings more perspective into the story of, you know, different people experience different hardships in life and how they go through that, how they survive it, how they push past it. And I really, really enjoy it because their stories help Feyre out a lot. And I love Amryn because she's just a spitfire. Yeah. I'm really happy with that joke. I just made it up. I really enjoy seeing her character in here. It's really fantastic. She's a fun character to just read about. And then there's more. I really thought I'd like more, a lot more than I did. That's that. I don't know. I really don't know what to say about her. But she is a good, I guess I can say she's a good friend to Feyre. And she's there for Feyre at times when nobody else really is. So she does have her good points, and she is a good friend to Feyre, so I'll give her that to her credit. But we also get more characterization from Nesta and Elaine in this story, and we get to explore more of their personalities. And I will say, I know a lot of people do not like her and they give her a lot of crap, but man, do I love Nesta. Her snarkiness and her quips are quite fun to read. They had me laughing a lot of the time. Before we get into the spoiler section, I'm gonna kind of give a brief like versus dislike and for it, and then I'll discuss it in full with the spoilers. I really like how this one is character driven. There's a lot more world building. There's some pretty decent foreshadowing, and it leads up to this big battle, and there's a lot of just good characterization going on in this book. So I do like that. And I like the development of the relationships in this book. Not just romantic, I'm just talking about like different types of relationships. For the dislikes, there was a few drastic character moments that I didn't think quite fit with those certain characters. There was some overcomplication of the plot that I think was drawn out much more than it needed to be. And there were some decisions characters made that didn't make any sense to me. I didn't like more. And there was some of Feyre's personality and her actions and thoughts in this book really bugged me a lot for like the first half of it. And then in the latter half of the book, it got better for me, and I started to enjoy her character a lot more. But now we're going to get into the spoiler section, so if you want to avoid spoilers, there's the timestamp below, and we'll go to the next book. So, for this one, what happened to Tamlin? Okay, that's just the first thing. What happened to Tamlin in this book? I feel like his character was so much different in this book than it was in the first book. I haven't reread the series. People keep telling me that if I reread it, it'll all make sense, but does it? I haven't reread it, so I can't say, but his character felt like bizarrely out of place. And like when he locked Feyre up inside the house and kept her basically prisoner there, I was just like, what is going on? I didn't understand that at all. Yeah, that really bugged me. Feyre and Rhys being mates, I mean, I called that from the first book. As soon as Rhys showed up, I was like, well, that's that. Tamlin's a wrap. It's all about Rhys now. And I was right. So it's kind of nice to be right, but at the same time, I was like, wow, that was like right there in your face. I will say, this book had the start of my favorite ship, and I can say it now, Nesta and Cassian. Oh my gosh. I love the banter. I really, really enjoyed their moments. One of the things I really didn't like about this book was the fact that when Feyre, after, Valeris was attacked and she defended it and did that awesome fight scene, which was fantastic, by the way. But after, Valeris was compromised and they knew that the witches, and they knew that the human queens betrayed them, why did she not think of Nesta and Elaine? Like, if Valeris had been compromised, so had they. Like, as soon as it happened, that was one of the first things to pop into my brain was like, oh my gosh, she needs to go check on her sisters. Like, are they okay? And then, like, she didn't even think about them the entire rest of the book until they show up and the King of Hybern's there and they got captured and thrown into the cauldron. And I'm like, well... And then she was like, oh no, my sisters, you can't do this. I'm like, you didn't even think about them like 10 chapters ago. But I didn't like it because it was some of those things like that didn't quite make sense because of how much she cared about them in the first book. For her to not even think about them at all in that moment just didn't make sense to me. And I wish the King of Hybern played a bigger role in this book, but I know why he didn't, because again, this is a very character focused book, so I know why he was really in the background majority of it. I wish there was more of a threat so I could feel how dire the need to like do all of this stuff was, but it was kind of lacking in that department. I didn't feel stressed like the characters were. And I don't like the way she treats Azriel and Cassian I'm not a fan of her. And I probably won't talk about her for the rest of the series because I don't like her. The Court of Nightmares was something I was also kind of iffy on because, there's this way Rhys is portrayed as like this big, horrible person. And then he's really not that way at all, yet he still has to try to act to keep up the facade because, they won't respect him otherwise. He could body that entire court in like 2 seconds if he wanted to. What is he worried about? I don't really get it. And also the way, for as much trauma as he went through under the mountain with being paraded around as, Amarantha's little toy, he sure didn't really seem to have a problem doing that to Feyre. I still don't get that part. That's just me. I don't understand why he would do that to Feyre, even though, she's still, Tamlin's or whatever, blah, blah. That didn't sit right with me. And I know he had the whole explanation when they were up in that little cabin and all of that happened. I just think if she was really going to commit to him being a morally gray person, then that explanation shouldn't have been so heartfelt and so just desperate. But that's my personal opinion. Because he's more of a good person who makes bad choices than he is a morally grave character. To the third book, A Court of Wings and Ruin. This is one of my favorites in the series. I really, really, really liked this book. So the entire plot of this one is pretty much just prepping for war. Feyre's got her own dilemma because she's back in the Spring Court and she's plotting against Tamlin, and she ends up roping Lucien unwillingly and unwittingly into her own scheme against the court and against Hybern. There's a lot of plot going on with, getting everything ready to fight, and, they need allies, they need an alliance, so we have to get the other courts involved, and there's a lot more politics and a lot more kind of like dancing around topics, strained relationships, all of this. Like, it's very, very rich in these matters, and I really like it. Finally, we get more focus on Nesta and Elaine because, they went through the cauldron the last book and it was awful, and, they're now experiencing their own set of trauma and they're trying to deal with what they've been given or what they took from the cauldron. All of that is surrounding with them, and they end up playing a massive role in this war. And, the inner circle is still there. They're working to do everything they can. Feyre and Rhys are now together, so they're doing everything they can while trying to protect what they have and enjoy the moments they have together. There's just so much going on. And of course, you have Tamlin being a petty little Tamlin. So there's so much going on, and there's more characters. And I will say, I love the Bone Carver and Bryaxis. I don't know why they have my heart, but they have my heart. Those characters add so much. Not only, and this, I'm gonna keep it spoiler free, but not only does the Bone Carver play a massive role for Feyre to resolve a lot of her inner turmoil, he also plays a massive role for the relationship between her and Rhys, and for the war itself and the information he gives and other things. And I really like how they made this side character become such an important part of the story. And I love that. The same with Bryaxis. You think Bryaxis is kind of just, oh, the shadowy figure that you're only going to hear about once or twice and that's it. But no, this character is named and made for a reason. There's a purpose behind it, and we're gonna see why. I love Bryaxis. He's so precious. But we also get more characters, and this is where I'm going to talk about Eris. I know a lot of people have mixed feelings, but I think Eris is a fantastic character. He is a true morally gray character, and I absolutely love to see him work. He is one of the characters in this story that you never truly know what side he's on. You never know what he's thinking, what he's plotting, and what he's gonna do. And I love that level of unpredictability, and when the payoff for all of it comes through, it's that much more satisfying to see what this character decided to choose. Good or bad, it's good to see what he chooses because it's just so much fun. I love characters like Eris. They make stories so much better because of the unpredictability, because you never know what's going on in their mind. And of course, in this book, there's a lot more romance. You get more things established, more things hinted at. I really like that. I really like that there's romance involved, and at some points, it does feel like it takes precedence over the actual plot, but then it knows itself well enough to kind of take the back seat, and it lets other things do its job. So it does have a decent balance. I really like that about this book. It's not heavily focused on romance, but it's not heavily focused on just war and fighting and stuff like that either. There's a good mixture of all of that in here. So in this book, I really, really love the complex characters that come out of it, and I love the complex character developments that come out of this, because none of these characters and the decisions they're making and the choice and what they're doing, what they're saying, none of it is easy. None of it is strictly good or bad. They all have an agenda, and they all have things they want to do, and it makes the plot in this book really, really good. I really, really started to love Feyre's character in this book, seeing her truly coming into her own and becoming her own person, not just, you know, as associated with, you know, Rhys, or associated with Tamlin, or even her sisters, or the inner court, or the inner circle, just truly becoming herself in this book. And that shines through so well. And I was sketchy on her character in the first two books. I learned to love Feyre in this book, and I'm so happy I did, because seeing her truly just blossom and everything come to fruition with her character, with all the build-up we got to her character, was wonderful. I did love Nesta in this book. I really enjoy Nesta's character. That's another complex character that it's very hard to put into a box. I love her character in this book. And I also like the payoff for the world building and the payoff for the plot and the build-up of this war. The things I don't like will be some of the characters that are in this one. Tamlin's character, I don't like him. And Again, more, I don't really like her. There's a few of the dynamics between things that I wasn't really a fan of. And I think there could have been some simpler solutions to what happened, but that's just me. My brain works differently, and that's fine. And so now for the spoiler section, again, timestamp down below, skip to the 4th book if you don't want to be spoiled. So I did think the war kind of ended a little too soon. It felt like it really just started and then it was boom, ended. And I know it was like this grand end. You had, you know, Feyre going back to the cauldron, you had Amryn going into the cauldron, you had Rhys dying, and all of these different things happening, and you get this perspective, you know, once Feyre's inside the cauldron, you get this perspective of everybody on the battlefield, and you know, that's when you get Nesta and Cassian, their big moment. You get Elaine killing the King of Hybern, and then Nesta, you know, just chopping his head off, which is quite, that part was quite satisfying. But then it's like, some of the things that felt disjointed to me was like Feyre's father coming back, because it was said that they hadn't heard from him, but there was absolutely no foreshadowing for his return. There was nothing to say that he was even going to be a character again after he was sent off. So that one kind of didn't feel right to me in this book. It didn't feel like it was earned, like his comeback was earned. So his death didn't really, it didn't really affect me. And Rhys's death didn't affect me as much because I knew he was coming back because there were still 2 more books. So I was like, oh, he's gonna live. I didn't know how, but I knew he was gonna live. It probably would have like scared me more had I not known that there was 2 other books in the series. But that's just because I got on the train for this series a little late. So there's nothing really wrong with that. It was just my personal experience in reading it because I was a little late to the game on this. And again, the Court of Nightmares, just that whole dynamic seemed off because they know Valeris and they know what the true Night Court is. So why does Rhys have to like put up this mask and everything? And I know like, oh well, him and Feyre talked about it, and him like putting down the mask, being who he truly was and everything. It's like, was there really a reason that he had to have it in the first place other than it was just there? That dynamic always felt a little odd to me. And if y'all want to discuss it down below, please do. Let me know what you think. If I've missed something or I'm like not remembering something, let me know. That's fine. I don't really mind. Just be nice. Because I have a bad memory at times, so if I just forgot something, just let me know that I forgot it, and I'll go back and read it. Yeah, I mean, those are really all the complaints I have with the book. This was this is like my 2nd favorite book in the whole series. It was wonderful. So that leads me to the 4th book. So, A Court of Frost and Starlight. It's a little novella, and I'll be completely honest, I don't have a lot to say about this book. The overall plot is basically them recovering from the war and kind of moving on, like their next steps after the war, what they're supposed to do after it's over and they're in this time of peace, or they have to like fight these little fires and these little rebellions that are popping up, and like what they do in those situations and how they're trying to settle into their own homes. I think the biggest takeaway from this book for me was with Nesta and Elaine and them trying to figure out like where they belong, their place now in this world of Fae that they didn't really have a choice to join, that they don't really know where exactly to go, what they're supposed to be doing, where they belong, any of that. So it's kind of a little bit, not much in this book, but there's a little bit of that conflict with them of what they're supposed to be doing now. My favorite part of this book was when we got that tidbit of Nesta's point of view, where we finally get inside her headspace a little bit. It's not much because, you know, that's the 5th book, but there's just a little bit there, enough to be like, ooh, this could be interesting. And then you get that little bit with Cassian as well. This book wasn't my favorite. This was probably the hardest book for me to get through, I will be honest. This wasn't my favorite. It felt a little disjointed from the rest of the series, and so I didn't quite enjoy it as much. But that's really all I have to say. I really don't have anything else to say about this book, not even like spoilers or anything. That's all I have to say about it. It's just there for me. I didn't like it. But now we get to the last one, A Court of Silver Flames, and was this book a treat? Oh my goodness. We finally got Nesta's point of view in this book. And we get all up in Nesta's head. We get her... Ow. Why is that sharp? Anyways, we get in her head about everything. We get to see how she's been dealing with things, which is not well. She has not been doing well. And we finally get an insight on why she acts the way she does, why she treats people the way she treats people. Oh, it's just so good. And we get more of her and Cassian, and we get more of Azriel, and it's fantastic, and I love it so much. And we get some new characters introduced. We get Gwen and we get Emery, and I love their dynamic a lot. This is the true, like, if I'd have to say the plot for this book, besides like recovery, it is found family, like a true found family that Nesta has, because she hasn't really had a chance to do that like Feyre has. Feyre was able to discover her own family through the Night Court and, you know, finding the inner circle and becoming friends with all these people. And she found, you know, her love, her true love in Rhys, her mate. And Nesta hadn't had a chance to do that because Nesta was, one, forced into this world of Fae so much that she took from the cauldron to spite it. And then she was just forced to go along, and then there's this war, and then after this war is over, it's like, well, what do I do now? So, I mean, it's very understandable why she'd be angry and bitter, because I probably would be too if that was me, just saying. But we also get a little bit more of, like, why she wants to take care of Elaine and why her, you know, her view of Elaine is the way it is. It's so interesting to me because Nesta's character has been teased since the very first book, because in the first book, she's the only one who goes after Feyre. She's the only one who goes to look for her sister to bring her back. I think a lot of people forget that about Nesta, but she doesn't want to show that she cares. Oh, if I was truly gonna talk about Nesta as a whole, I'd have to make a whole separate video because there's just way too much there. Along with, you know, Nesta's found family and this recovery process that she's going through, there's other plot points, like the kind of teased in the other one is like this threatened war and rebellion because of some unsettlement from the last war. So that's kind of going on as well. And there's another plot point, but I'm not going to say anything because I will put it in the spoiler section. The main characters in this book is Nesta, Cassian, Azriel, Gwen, Emery, and Eris. Elaine and Feyre and Rhys are kind of there, and Amren, but not really. They're not the main focus of this story. So they're kind of in background. They're kind of the background characters now, like Nesta was for the first few books. I've already kind of heaped my praises on it of what I liked about this book. So quickly, what I dislike before we get into the spoiler section. What I dislike about this book. Okay, actually, no, I can't say any of the dislikes because those are spoilers. So, I will say the overall plot of this book was really good because it gives you a fresh perspective on a character that we've never truly understood, and the plot is a lot darker than any of the other books before it. This book goes into some pretty heavy and dark themes, especially with Nesta's title and what Nesta took from the cauldron. I'm not going to say what. But this book is so much darker, and maybe I just like darker books and darker fiction and characters, but I really, really liked how deep into these themes that we got in this book. It was very good, but it is kind of heavy with the darkness, so if you're not a fan of that, just kind of be warned going into this book that it is darker than the rest of the series. With that being said, I'm going to talk about spoilers now, so if you want to skip to where I do my rankings, here's the timestamp for that. So, I can't tell y'all how much I like this book. First of all, I love Nesta and Cassian together. I love their whole dynamic, and I'm actually not bothered. I know a lot of people are bothered by the fact that Cassian never said I love you to Nesta. That doesn't bother me because Nesta needed to be the one to voice it because she's never voiced how she truly feels. And so she's the one who gets to voice it, and Cassian's the one who gets to show it. Because Nesta, above everything, she needed to be shown that type of love, and Cassian did that without reserve. And I really, 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 really love their dynamic. I love that they were mates. I kind of was expecting it, but I was like, oh, maybe it's just they're gonna be like in love without it being mates. But no, they're mates, so that's fine. It works. I'm happy with that. I'm satisfied. Even though Cassian's quick off the mark, it's fine. They're great together. I love it. And I do enjoy the plot of the Valkyries and how Gwen and Emery really come into Nesta's life, and they're really her closest friends, they're her sisters that she would do anything for. And I love the scene when she's on the mountain and she knows, you know, Gwen is trying to carry, is it Gwen or Emery? I think it's Gwen. No, Emery trying to carry whichever one. They're going up the mountain to reach to the top, and Nesta is having to face off against the Illyrian warrior to hold him off so he can't get to them. And when she draws the line and she's like, you're not getting past me. Oh, I love that so much because that's just like the epitome of her character growth, because she wouldn't have done that before. And I really, 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 really love Nesta and her character. And I love that in this book we explore more even on characters like Eris and really get into his duality with like what you think he's doing and what he's actually doing. I love that Nesta in this book is finally kind of accepting her powers, and the fact that she's like, she took death from the cauldron is really cool. It's such a fascinating concept. I loved it. Those powers were so freaking awesome. I wish they would have done more with it. That might be one of my only complaints, is I wish they would have done more with her powers, but I understand why they didn't, because she was still like trying to reject them and all of that. But oh my goodness, when she was at the swamp and she fought underneath the water and she got the mask and put it on, and ooh, love that scene. But what I don't like about that book is one of the plot points that I didn't mention earlier was Feyre's pregnancy, because Feyre's pregnancy seemed to be played for more of a plot point than an actual like life event that happens. And I don't like, it makes absolutely no sense why they had her birth happen the way it happened. Like that doesn't make sense. And I feel like they nerfed Nesta at the end when she had to give up majority of her powers back to the cauldron to save Feyre. Like, I get why they did that, because she says she loves Feyre, and you know, that's a huge moment for her to do that for her sister. I get that. I really, really do. But I feel like they just nerfed Nesta at the end, and I did not like that. I'm like, we went through this entire arc of her like accepting her powers and wanting her powers to like do things and help others, and then at the very end you're just gonna take it away. Like, ugh! I did not like that part about it. And I wasn't really a fan of Elaine in this book. She did, like, I just feel like Elaine hasn't really done anything besides kill the King of Hybern, which, I mean, yeah, that's a pretty big thing. But like, ever since then, it's just like she's just there. I just need more from her. But I don't know if I want a book from her perspective or not, but I want her to do something. I don't know what, but I want her to do something. So that's kind of my review, and a very quick review of all 5 books in the series. I could probably go into more depth with each book, but for right now it's just kind of a brief synopsis, brief overview. So my rankings of the books, I wrote this down. So my rankings, first place is A Court of Silver Flames. That is my favorite book in the series. I loved it so much. My second favorite is A Court of Wings and Ruin. Loved that book. It was a really, really great book too. Third is A Court of Mist and Fury. Fourth is A Court of Thorns and Roses. And fifth is A Court of Frost and Starlight. I really didn't have anything to say about that book. That still baffles me. So those are my rankings of the books. Y'all's might be different. I don't think I've ever seen anybody with the same ranking I have. But we'll see. If y'all have the same ranking, hey, let me know. Let me know what y'all's rankings are of this series, because I'd be really curious to know. My top 3 favorite characters, I'm sure this is not going to surprise anybody by the way this review went. Nesta, Cassian, and Azriel. Those are my top 3 characters in the entire series. So that's it for this video. That's my kind of brief overview of the Acotar series. I really enjoyed this series, and I know it's connected to some of the other series that she's written. I haven't gotten to them yet. They're somewhere up there. But yeah, I will be doing more book videos in the future. I have one planned for like October. I'm gonna do a book recommendation of kind of the spookier books or books that kind of fit the fall vibe. So be on the lookout for that if you want more like book recommendations in that genre specifically. But yeah, I really hope you enjoyed. Let me know down below what you think of the video, what you think of my comments. If I missed any big plot points, let me know down below. So I enjoyed it overall. If I had to give the series a ranking as a whole, I would say it falls at about a 7.5 to 8 out of 10 because it wasn't perfect. There were some things I didn't like. There were some things like that didn't add up, but overall it was just a good series and I liked it. So thank you so much for sticking with me through this video. I know it's a long one, it's a hefty boy, but I appreciate you staying here through the entire video. Make sure if you want to see more videos from me, you like and subscribe down below. I do a lot of different posts and I'm going to be doing more in the future. So thanks again, and I will see you next time, scholars. Bye!